Hello, my name is Adam. I'm a project manager at Windward, and we are going to continue with our tutorial on how to make a basic invoice template in the Windward Designer. If you missed the last video, please go ahead and watch it. What we accomplished was we created this nicely formatted title and sort of success and how to get in contact with us header at the top of our document. And now, and we did connect to our data source. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start getting into tagging our document. So everything we've done so far in the document template, in the Windward template here, is static text. We expect every single user to receive this with the same title. We have a sample title here, but the same title. Our success team contact information isn't changing. So these things are all static, but now we're going to get into adding some dynamic text. If we revisit the target output document that we're trying to make, you see we have build to information here that we're about to be adding that is going to be dynamic, and we're also going to be taking a dynamic value to determine whose invoice exactly we're going to be producing. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, to start with what I just said, taking in a value from outside of the template regarding whose invoice we're going to be producing. This template is not concerned with where that data is coming from, at least not the way we're going to implement it, which is as an input parameter. All we have to do here is set up the input parameter. It's asking if I'd like to save the document before putting in this input parameter. I'll say yes. We'll set up an input parameter, and then that input parameter can come from many places. A likely place is that if you're creating this template to be run from inside of your own internal or external application, so then you might have a value in a variable in your software, and you can pass that variable to this template as the input parameter, and then the output will be populated with data based around that value that you pass into the template. So what we'll do is we'll add an input parameter here. For the input parameter we're going to be adding, what I actually want to add is the ID for the order that we are going to run this invoice for. So we have a specific order. We want the invoice for that order. That's what we're going to be producing. So I'm going to call this order ID, and I'm going to specify that it is an input parameter. I tend to do my variables in lowercase camel case like this. That's my preferred method, but as you please. The most important thing here is that if I see this variable down the line in my template, if you're creating a very large template especially, and you have lots of variables, you want to be able to easily identify it and understand what it is without going and searching through your template. The default variable names of varname1, varname2, they'll keep your variables from conflicting with each other, but they won't help clarify this. Now, we connected to our data source last tutorial, and what I'm going to do is actually do a select from the data source for the sake of this tutorial, which will allow us to see a list of order IDs that we can select from to run the template for. Inside of the designer, this will offer us a nice experience to select an order ID that we'd like to run this template for. So I'll click this little wizard icon here. This wizard will help me create a select easily. I won't go too in depth with it. We'll only go in as much depth as we need to create this template that we're building, but it's a very convenient tool. You'll see us using it a lot in these tutorials. So the thing that I'm looking for, I happen to know I'm looking for, excuse me, is an order ID. We have a search bar here in the wizard, and we do associate with a lot of our data trees where you can search keywords. If I didn't know that this was called order ID, which is quite likely, I could try searching the word order. First, I'm coming up with order details here. If I hit return again, there's order ID. This seems valid, although I see there's also an orders table here. Let's take a look at each of these. This one has order ID and product ID. This one has order ID, customer ID. So it looks to me like this table is the table that actually contains unique orders, and then this other table, since it has order ID and product ID, will allow us to associate a single order to potentially multiple products. I also see the customer ID is here, and I'm going to need that customer ID later in my template. So I'm going to take this order ID, which is directly associated also with this customer ID. And selecting this order ID in the wizard, you don't need to know any query languages. This is why this tutorial is useful for users who are going to be using wizards in XML, JSON, OData, SQL, Salesforce. The wizards might look different, but they're generally this easy to use, where we don't need to know how to write the select. We simply need to know simple operations like drag and drop or point and click. By dragging and dropping this order ID column from the orders table in our SQL data, it's automatically generated the select down here to get that column from our database, and we have a list of records being returned. This is the record that I'm wishing to return for this input parameter, and this will come together in a second, where if we save this and try running this to output, well, yes, we want to save this report before generating output. You see it offers us a drop-down with a list of those records, those order ID results that are returned from the database. If we select one of these, currently we don't have any dynamic data in the template, but it will run our output using that variable value that we've specified, that input value. Again, in this case, we've set it up so that the input is something selected by the user. On output from the designer, this makes it easy to design. In production deployment, for example, that could be a value coming out of your application, or it could come from other sources. That's just a common use. Okay, so let's start. Actually, before we get into it too much, you'll notice if I output right now, when I'm presented with this ability to specify what I want to input for this input parameter, there's nothing in here by default. One problem with that is that if later we preview a value in our template that is queried by using this input parameter, it won't know what value to query with. So let's specify a default value for that input parameter. Whoops, I need to go to input parameters. And that way, when we preview something in the template, it will have something to show us. So I'm just going to use the top value here, 10249. There we go. 10249. Okay. And now if we save this with that default value, this actually, I'm also going to change this to not be a text type. This is, after all, an integer. So we'll give this 10249. This is a, what are we doing? We're giving this input parameter a type value. We're typing it. So that will help us if we're ever using this in a comparison or something like that. Just good practice for us to give it the same type as the value. Okay, so we'll save. And now if we go to output this template, you see we have that default populated. Great. Okay, but let's get into some dynamic values in our template. So to remind you what our goal looks like here, we'll start tackling this section next where we have bill to, ship to, and then these are all dynamic values depending on what order ID we're specifying as the input parameter. Same thing here with the invoice date, PO number, due date. So first, let's set up this formatting for this part of the document. I'm going to use the same method we use to format the top of the document, which is that it's a table. I see sort of generally we have one column here, another column here, another column here. So what I'm going to do is insert a table that has, oops, maybe we need to go down another line. Let's try that. There we go. I'm going to insert a table that has 4 columns and 2 rows. The reason is because there's these 4 columns we identified, but I also see that it looks like these bill to and ship to titles above these addresses are in a different row, and then these addresses below are in their own row. That's the reason I'm doing this. Now remember from the last tutorial, we have view table grid lines turned off. If we turn it back on, there's the table we just inserted. It defaulted to having no borders like the table we had above. I'll leave these grid lines on for us to easily edit this table right now. And it's time for us to start querying some values. So let's add our bill to title here to start. And I'm going to quickly, while we're in here, I'm going to add ship to as well. We'll be able to fill out these 2 areas in the near future. And now the question is, how do we get this dynamic information into our template? Specifically, this is a customer being billed for the order ID that is going to be passed in as our input parameter. That's what we're needing to fill out here, or rather the data we're going to need to query. So what I'm going to do is use the Windward query tag. This tag is useful when you're querying a single row of data in SQL or a single node in a node-based data provider like XML or JSON. And we can build a query for this query tag just like we did earlier where we built a query for the input parameter. I'm going to go here to Wizard and select Wizard. That wizard will automatically come up if I click the wizard as well. So we go to our select wizard here, and we're going to want to get the customer billing information for the order ID that's being specified in our input parameter. Let's look for customers. Customer demo, no. Customer ID, customer type ID, customer demographics, also no. Customers, here we go. Okay, this is what I want. All right, here we have our customer, and I'm going to only select the relevant information that I'm going to need for this section of my template. This is good practice to not query more than you need. In some cases, it really doesn't cause any problems. In other cases, querying more records than you need could be the difference between a template processing quickly and a template processing very slowly, even for the exact same output, just because of in the template querying more or more than you need of the more records than you need. So for us, we need, it looks like the first name, the street address, the name of the city, the postal code, and the name of the country. Oh, whoops, this opens a tag editor. That's another useful tool, but that's not what I'm going to use for this tag. So here we open our wizard again. There's that customers table. I'm going to drag in, whoops, I don't need company name, I need contact name. I need address. I need city. I don't need region actually, although this seems like it might be important to billing information, so let's put it in there. Postal code, country, and that's everything for now. Now this is great. I can expand this preview over here. We have all this data coming into our template. It looks like we have some users where there is no region. Some users the region is specified. That's interesting to know for the future. And the next question is, okay, well, I'm only outputting an invoice for a single order, and there's going to be a single customer associated with that order. How do I get down to a single customer? To do that, we can use this filter tool here. Like I said, I think in the first tutorial, we are going to be using only as much functionality as we need to accomplish this template. And so I'm not going to go super in depth into all of the different powerful things you can do with the filter, but we're going to do just what we need, what I need as the developer for this template. What I'm trying to say is if you would like to learn more about this tool, please refer to our documentation resources and other tutorials. For now, we'll keep our eyes on the prize of this template. Okay, let's go ahead. All right, so we will come in here and we're going to add a filter to make sure that we're only getting the customer record associated with our order. I'm going to add a group and add a filter. And this filter is going to have two sides on either side of a condition. In this case, we're going to be using the equal to condition. Now, I know from my knowledge, and I'm happy to teach you, that this right side of the condition, you can input a specified static value that you're specifying, but you can also use not just an input parameter, but a template variable that's in your template. In this case, the only variable we have so far in our template is this input parameter that we specified earlier, order ID input parameter. Now we can use that order ID input parameter in this condition to determine if the customer we're looking at is the customer who is relevant to the order ID that was passed in. Now, one thing we have to wonder is everything we're querying here is from this customers table. How are we going to figure out which customer is the correct customer for the order ID passed in? I'll expand the orders table down here, and you can see that there's the order ID that was passed in, and it also has a customer ID that will match with a customer ID in our customers table. Now what I want to do is be able to pair up this order ID with the customer's ID in the customer's table. That way I can compare the order ID to the input parameter, and then I know based off of that order ID and the associated customer ID which customer we need to be dealing with. Now, there's a concept in SQL called a join that accomplishes this, but in this tool we don't need to know how to write SQL queries. All we have to know is how to drag and drop. And to form a join between this orders table and this customers table, specifically I know I'm going to want this order ID column, Windward will do all the work for you. All you have to do is drag and drop the order ID into the columns here. And you'll notice that our query down here was expanded with this concept in SQL called a join. And what this is doing is it will match up the, in this case we can see actually down here that's the customer ID. It'll match the customer ID specified for any record in this orders table with the customer ID specified in the customers table, which is the two tables that we're querying data from. Now that I have a join formed between these two tables, which happen automatically, I would recommend, if you are going to be doing this sort of thing we're doing where we need to compare the order ID from this table and we need to match up these customers' ID, just dragging the node over is an easy way. Adding it to the number of columns being selected here is an easy way to perform this join. And now we'll be able to use our order ID input parameter, and we can match it up from our database here with the orders order ID. So what we've done, remember we used the default 10 to 10249 earlier. That was our default value, and that's the value it's using in our previewed result here. We've matched up that input parameter default value with an order ID in the orders table, and then we've matched up that order ID with a customer ID, and these are the customer fields that we need to fill out. Whoops, I dragged something. These are the customer fields that we need to add to our template. Okay, great. Let's keep going. So the last thing we'll do for this tutorial is we will add some out tags. Now this query tag will not actually output anything. And in fact, looking at this query tag doesn't look very nice right now. It looked way better earlier. Let's try and get it to look good again. Something we can do is we can give it a nickname, and this will make it look smaller in the template. I'll name this one, let's say, customer query var. And if I hit return, that nickname will be used instead of this long, that long default string. I'm also going to give it a new variable name, var name1. Like I said earlier, that's not going to help me down the line. If I call it something more descriptive, I'll call it customer query var. Oh, I realize that's what I used for the nickname above. Let's use that for the customer variable. It'll ask if we want to change all future uses of var name1 to customer query var. If we'd spent a long time programming, or not programming, sorry, one of the great things you don't need to program for these templates, but if we spend a lot of time designing this template and we use var name1 all over the place, then this would automatically change all of those instances of the variable name to customer query var. So yes, I'm going to change this just to be customer query. It's not actually a value or a var. There we go. Looks good. Okay. So what I was saying is that the query tag does not actually output anything in our template. It's simply querying data for us. And it'll query that data under this variable name, and then we can use it later on. If we output our template, we should see that this is correct, and the query tag will not cause any changes to the output. In fact, it's as if it never existed. There's not even a space between that tag and the build to, since there wasn't a space in the template. What we can output with is an out tag. This out tag will cause output to appear in the output from the template. Our output report will have values substituted for these tags. Something I like to do when I know the format that I'm going to do if I'm making a large table, or in this case where I know I'm going to have name, street address, city, postal code, country, is I put all my out tags in first and then I fill out all the values for them. So what I'm going to do is this is the out tag for the first name, I'll do the out tag for the street address, the out tag for the city, I'll do a comma, the out tag for the city will just have the city name, the out tag for the postal code will just have the postal code, the comma and the space I'd like to put in between are formatting that I'm going to have be static in my template, and then we'll have an out tag for the country. my very favorite tool, possibly one of my favorite tools in the product actually, just because it's so helpful to me when I'm making a template like this, is the data tree here. And this will show me all of the data from my database, and it will also show me variables that are in scope of where I am right now in the template. Currently in scope is the input parameter to the entire template, and then also the query tag that we have above. This is showing my query tags and the variables for those query tags. Here's customer query var. And if we look under this query var, there's the contact name that we queried earlier in the wizard. I'll select contact name, and then if we want to see, did it work? Let's try previewing. There we go, Karen Josephs. We'll do the same thing for each of these tags to match the formatting, the desired formatting in our output template. The street address, this one was the city. Then we want the postal code, and then we want the country. For now, notice I queried before the region when we queried the data in the customer query. For this record, it's blank. At the end of this tutorial, I'm going to come back and show you how to dynamically handle whether that region is blank or whether it is populated. For now, we're going to simply leave it out. So watch for future videos, and in one of the future videos, we'll make some final improvements to the template, and one of the things will be improving that, handling that case. So now we're looking pretty good in the template. Let's see how we're looking in output. Using this default variable still, I'm just going to use the default for a while. And it looks like we're getting there. Compared to our goal output, we're getting closer. Looks like we have some formatting stuff to resolve. Let's resolve that real quick. The spacing on this looks quite far. Let's see if I can highlight it here. Go to my spacing and change it to 1. Maybe that'll help. I worked through some challenges like this, just like anyone. Let's see if we can figure it out. Here we go. We have some spacing after the lines, so let's reduce this down to 0. There we go. That helps. Try output again, and per usual, it'll ask us to save on our output. Wonderful. That's more like what we're looking for. We'll leave this video here, and I hope to see you in the next video. Again, we're aiming on creating this full dynamic user invoice, this Windward invoice sample we have here, and look forward to finishing it up with you in the next video. So thank you, and see you there.